What was your worst encounter with a goose? No joke. When I was a kid, someone told me to get down to eye level and try to stare them down if they were in attack mode. Clearly the wrong thing to do. I lost that battle. I ended up running away scared as heck. The aforementioned adult was clearly messing with me, laughing while little 9-year-old me got traumatized. My daughters were feeding breadcrumbs to ducks at the lake by our house. 2 very large, really aggressive geese came attacking. My kids were 7 and 4 and hiding behind me. I was trying to protect them, but the geese have long necks and were reaching around the sides nipping at my kids. Loud noises, pushing geese, nothing was working. The larger of the 2 bit my baby on the face and I punted it in my head. It played out like kicking a pillow and the pillow would fly dozens of feet. In reality, kicking the goose was like kicking a bag of concrete. Instead of being punted over the goalposts, it flopped over like a full strength man kick barely tipped it over. I did stop the attack on my kid though. This was 12 years ago. The same goose is still at the lake and definitely recognizes me. Even if I'm on a boat, when we see each other it turns 180 and goes the other way. I'm lucky I didn't shatter my foot. Geese are made of concrete and are totally evil. My grandmother would feed geese on our nearby pond with pieces of bread. When I was a little kid, I once bent over near the water's edge, with my back to the geese, where she had inadvertently dropped some bread. As I started to pick it up, a goose nipped me right in the butt good and hard enough to draw some blood and leave me with bumps from the bite. Many years ago, my parents and I lived in a semi-rural area. With this space, and because I had been in 4-H before high school, we had a pair of geese. We'd raised them from goslings, which you'd think would have made them tamer and friendly at us. Or at the very least not filled with a hatred-fueled rage at the sight of any human. It did not. Moving through the backyard became an obstacle course. The gander would see you, lower his neck into a torpedo-like line, hiss quietly, and charge. Once he'd reached his target victim, he'd beat at your shins and thighs with the bony sections of his wings, honk repeatedly at top volume, and bite you wherever possible. Once your flesh was between the living pliers of his mouth, his lizard brain was somehow clever enough to learn that biting and then twisting his head simultaneously was extra effective in his own private turf war with the humans. This became pretty much a routine and expected thing to avoid, and we kept the damn things despite their aggression because at least they were good for home security. The worst experience, so the white demons mostly ate grass but still needed to be fed and watered. It was raining that day, and I had just showered and changed clothes in order to leave the house soon for an appointment. I ran out to the backyard quickly to feed the geese. I saw no sign of them, all was clear, lucky me. I dumped poultry mash into the feed hopper, and ran back inside to finish getting ready to go. As I was almost out the door, I remembered I hadn't changed their water. It was a big tub, and they'd climb in and poop in it. I head back out, and see no sign of them. Great. I thought maybe they'd eaten and gone to hide out from the rain. I changed the water in the tub, stepped out from beneath the covered area where they ate, and was immediately attacked from behind with repeated blows to my calves. The rain had been loud enough to drown out the low warning hiss of the gander approaching. It was also wet and slippery, and our geese were strong, from a stocky and powerful meat breed. I slipped and fell flat on my back, knocking the wind out of me, into a slurry of mud, rainwater, and goose poop. I also had bigger problems, because now I was down at his level, unable to immediately run away. The gander got very excited at this unprecedented level of victory, and began honking and beating my now defensively raised arms with his wings. Remember how I had just fed them? In the interim, he'd gorged himself silly on feed mash, and washed it down with water. They are big birds, and his crop gizzard was easily the size of a softball. I'm not sure if it was the excitement or the exertion, but of course as I was cursing and coughing and flailing in the mud, he began vomiting. This bird begins puking, and it's like a projectile fountain, going everywhere. He was trying to climb onto me, still trying to bite me, still honking, still beating me with his wings. But he was also shaking his head side to side to clear his mouth and throat, spraying me with partially digested feed mash in his best impression of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. I eventually managed to shove him off of me and back a few feet, scrambled to my feet and ran away. He did the goose equivalent of gloating about it and honked up a storm until I got back to the house. The final outcome, I was completely rain soaked. My back and legs were covered in a mixture of goose poop and mud. My front face head were covered in bird vomit. I had 2 bleeding bite pinch wounds to my legs through my pants, a number of wing inflicted bruises to my arms and torso, and a large bruise on my back and a smashed elbow from the fall itself. The humiliation is all that remains today. I was also late to my appointment. It was just a few days after we got our first dog. He's a black lab mix. Cute as hell. Probably a failed service dog. Had a lot of trust issues at the beginning. We hadn't really established our pecking order yet. So, couple days after we get him, we figured we'd take him down to a dog park that had a lake near it. First, we took him to the dog park part of it and everything went great. Then we took him for a walk around the lake. There was a big ass goose hanging out by a tree, probably being a dick or something. It must have looked at my dog wrong or something, because right then and there, my dog pounced on this big ass goose and had it pinned down by its neck. Dog's tail was wagging and he was looking at us like, please be proud of me. Didn't hurt the goose at all. Probably didn't even scare it. Because as soon as we got our dog off of it, it started charging us, making those weird ass goose noises that they do. Its wings were out all big like it was trying to pay us back for our dog pinning it down. Well, it worked, because we left cause I didn't want my dog to kill a goose. So a few months later, I go back to the lake with my cousin and my dog. We're walking around the lake like before and then start hearing goose noises coming from the lake. I'm panicking and thinking that my dog is going to go effing nuts until I let him kill a damn goose. The goose sounds stop for a second and I let my guard down for just a tiny second. Big mistake. My dog had pulled me into the damn lake. I was sitting on my ass in about 4 inches of nasty lake water while he tried to get this goose that was taunting him. We've not gone back to that lake since. This was almost 4 years ago. I'm fishing one morning by a lake and I hear geese honking. I turn around and look up and there's a chevron of geese about 30 feet up and their course will take them directly over me. I don't know why, but I stand absolutely still and just watch this unfolding. After all, geese don't poop when they're flying, right? Dead. Wrong. I think it's the lead goose, but I'm not sure. But one of those geese near the front poops, and if you've ever seen goose poop you know it's no small matter. Well, that goose times it perfectly because that goose poop trajectory is sending it right at me. Thing is, I'm watching all this happen, so I take one step to the side and the goose hits the ground about 2 feet behind where I was just standing, so yeah, at that angle it would have hit me full on. I look down to my left at the goose poop and then I look up and there's another guy fishing and he's just looking at me and laughing. I don't remember what we said to each other, but he pretty much saw the whole thing. Screw you, goose. Better luck next time. Let me tell you. When I was about 6 years old, I was walking in the park by a small pond where there were 3 or 4 geese hanging out. I wasn't thinking anything about it because I was 6 and they were birds. As I was walking by them, one started running at me, hissing, flapping his wings, and honking. Terrified, I started running for my life. He actually chased me down and bit me on my rear end, partially pulling down my pants. My mom later told the story that one of them was nesting and I walked too closely. Jogging down this narrow pathway at the local park, I see this honking feathered dinosaur of evil begin his show of aggression, bobbing his head up and down as if to say yes. The time has come for you to die. I try to skirt around him, drawing near to the reeds and willow on the edge of the path. Suddenly, another emerges from the reeds. That's when I remembered what Dr. Grant said. Geese don't attack from the front, but from the sides. I only managed to utter a small clever girl before it flew toward me, chasing me down the pathway. Onlookers helpless as they discovered man's place at the top of the food chain was not as secure as they had been led to believe. They're smart, powerful, and have the aerial advantage. One day they'll come for us and we will be helpless. Velociraptors didn't go extinct, they just evolved into geese. Change my mind. Once on my way to work I was walking through the large parking lot to go inside when this goose comes running at me in full attack mode. I leapt at my face hissing and bitting, and when I finally got it away it came at me again. At that point I was done with this goose and punted it as hard as I could with my steel toe boots. It never messed with me again after that. I do feel kinda bad for that though, as I love animals, but that goose was just a doc. I heard from some of my co-workers that it had attacked as well, that after I punted it, it had decided to just stay away from people around the building, so there is that too. Thanks for reading. For as long as I can remember, I've had an inexplicable intense hatred for geese. I'm pretty sure it started from a commercial I heard when I was younger on the radio, where the narrator described something along the lines of there are 6 geese around your car, and they won't let you out, though I've had other borderline traumatic events to happen since. I had a recurring nightmare about Big Bird, can't remember it, that totally made me dislike birds in general. And then one time, during show and tell, this kid passed out a duck call book. We weren't supposed to press the sound, and on the goose page, I played the loud call of the evil birds out to the silently working class. It likely didn't help that further research led me to learn they are, indeed, violent creatures. Anyway, in high school we had a lot of geese around in the springtime. There was goose poop everywhere, all season long, and they walked around like they owned the place. One time, my friends and I were headed back to the school at about 5 PM to do some shooting for a film project. Only, the way in was completely blocked by a parade of geese. We sat there for a good 10 minutes while this ignorant gaggle of vile birds congregated on driveway, completely blocking us from continuing on with our work. They just walked around without a clue, and I was getting absolutely furious. Fully intent on removing this problem, I was readying myself. I love animals, but I was getting ready to get into a legitimate fight with these heartless beings. I knew that if I got out of that car, they would know what's up, and they would fight back. There was going to be blood. I kept saying I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna curb stomp some geese guys, I swear to God, and people were laughing. But I was genuinely angry. They began to pick up on it and tried to convince me not to fight them, as I'm frail, and they significantly outnumbered me, but I didn't care. The geese just wandered around, mocking us. As I was unbuckling and getting ready to open the door, they fled. Like cowards, they filed off of the road and on to harass whoever else they could intimidate with their gang-like attitude. It wasn't exactly a terrible experience, but it made me aware that I'm fully prepared to fight a goose, need be. Frick. Geese. Glad to see other people here feel the same way. Not a goose but a swan. I was 7 years old on a fishing trip with my granddad and cousin, and a swan began swimming towards me, hissing and spreading his wings. Anyone who has seen hot fuzz-nosed swans can be just as evil as geese. Anyway, it was certainly about to attack me when my granddad, not even flinching, wearing his Arthur Morgan-esque cowboy hat, fricking dropkicks the swan back into the lake. As much as I wish I had the imagination to make this stuff up, it did actually happen. Granddad's a fricking legend. I have a boxing match versus one next Saturday. It's my first amateur fight. My friend and I were riding our bikes to school one day in the early spring and we were already late for a test, so we had our fair share of cardio for the day. The route we had to take went past this small nature reserve with a couple of bodies of water. This particular road, only for cyclists, was usually very quiet and it was rare we would encounter another person. The trip went smoothly until we turned a corner and we almost shat our pants. On both sides of the road were literally hundreds of course. Normally this wouldn't be too much of an issue, but they were accompanied by dozens of baby geese, which, naturally, makes them very protective and aggressive. We slowed down and tried to assess the situation, but we concluded that we had to just try to pass these hundreds of geese as we could not afford to miss the test. We decided to just pass between the two groups slowly as not to anger any of them. All went well until a group of baby geese decided that this was a perfect time to cross the road. We barely managed to avoid the baby geese, but now all the adult geese were livid. One goose started to make this gargling sound and spread his wings and soon was joined by hundreds of other geese. The choir of goose gargles was deafening and terrifying at the same time. They started to slowly walk to us in this terrifying death march, seemingly all in rhythm. I raced away harder than a doped up Lance Armstrong, but my friend's bike chain had become stuck. He jumped from his bike and starting to run to safety, bike in hand. In the commotion, however, He dropped his Tamagotchi. For a moment we thought about rescuing Daddy, which is what he had named his virtual best friend for some reason, but we decided that Daddy's sacrifice would not be in vain. Drenched in teenage sweat we arrived at school, looking whiter than ever, and completely bombed the test. I didn't care. I had survived an attack of long-necked lunatics and lived to tell the tale. After school we took another route and did so for the rest of the school year. We never saw Daddy again, but lest we never forget. Screw Geese. R.I.P. Daddy. Tried to block me out of my truck. I made sure nobody was around and pepper sprayed it. 9 out of 10 still made lots of noise. We went on a school field trip to local marsh in 4th grade. It was supposed to teach us about the marshland ecosystem, how reeds filtered water, how the fish and turtles played into it, etc. We took big air pontoons out into the marsh to take water samples that we were going to examine under microscopes back at school. Sadly the pontoons drifted in the wind toward a reed island that was, apparently, full of nesting geese families. Imagine 24 screaming 4th graders hitting the deck of the pontoon while being dive and poop bombed by fricking rude geese while the teacher was trying to, apparently for the first time, learn to steer an airboat into the wind. Canada only has a few things to apologize for. Justin Bieber. Nickelback. Bare naked ladies and motherfucking geese. What's wrong with bare naked ladies? Had a lanyard hanging out of my pocket. Goose saw it. Goose wanted it. Goose gave chase. That's all for the video guys. Hope you liked it. I missed uploads the last couple of days because I was busy with school and work. Oops. My Instagram @Reddit and Insta now has over 200 followers. Excellent. If you like the content, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is simply watch the videos. But if you really want to see the channel thrive, subscribe, like, comment, add to favorites, add to playlist, and share with friends. Thank you guys so much and I will see you with tomorrow's upload.